My dad held a family hostage because he missed buying his lottery numbers the night he had the flu. When I visited him in jail, he pressed scratch-offs against the glass and whispered, 7 sevens. It's a sign, son. We're so close. I didn't say a word. That was 3 months ago. Last week, he screamed in court that the numbers were stolen. They had to drag him out. I walked in on my dad crying over a lottery ticket. His whole body shook as he held up the crumpled paper. I was 2 numbers off. 2 damn numbers from 300 million. He looked up at me with red eyes. You gave up medical school to work a minimum wage job for us, and I can't even win the damn lottery for you. From there, Dad had a mindset shift in the worst way possible. Every Friday after I cashed my paycheck, Dad and I would drive to the corner store. He'd buy his tickets while explaining probability to me. Someone wins every week. Why not us? He somehow convinced the whole construction crew to go in together on tickets during lunch breaks. It felt normal, hopeful even. When Dad won $500 one week, he immediately transferred it to my college fund. We actually had a happy dinner that night. Dad used the leftover money to bring Mom flowers. When we win big, I'll get you a whole garden, he promised her. Everything changed the week Dad had the flu. He was too sick to go buy his usual numbers. Saturday night, we watched the drawing together and his face went white. His exact numbers came up. The same 5 numbers plus the Powerball he'd been playing for 7 years. $300 million jackpot. Dad filled notebooks with number patterns and sequences after that. The universe was trying to tell me something, he'd mutter while scribbling. Mom started hiding the bills so he wouldn't see how behind we were. I'd sneak extra 20s into his wallet when he wasn't looking. He started skipping work to study his patterns. When his boss called, I covered for him. Yeah, he's sick. Real bad flu. 3 different stores banned him for harassing other customers. My uncle tried talking sense into him, but Dad just accused everyone of blocking his destiny. Then the news broke about the local teacher winning $77 million with a quick pick. Dad watched that winner's interview on repeat for 3 days straight. Those were my numbers, he kept saying. I was working a late shift at the warehouse when Mom called me panicked. Your father left 2 hours ago. He said he was getting what's his. I checked all the usual spots first. The corner store, the gas station. Then I remembered his obsession with the winner. I drove toward the teacher's neighborhood and saw the flashing lights from 2 blocks away. Police cars everywhere. Dad's car was parked on the lawn. My stomach dropped. A cop walked over when he saw me. You know the owner of that vehicle? I nodded. That's my dad. He sighed. You need to come with us, son. At the station, they put me in a small room with a detective. She turned her laptop toward me. This is from the victim's doorbell camera. I watched my father force his way into the house holding a kitchen knife. The detective fast-forwarded. He held the family hostage for 3 hours, demanding to know how they picked the winning numbers. She paused the video. The victim's elderly mother was visiting. She had a heart attack during the incident. My hands went numb. Is she? The detective shook her head. She didn't make it. They showed me evidence bags with Dad's notebooks. Pages covered in circled numbers and photos of the winner. One page just said, my numbers, over and over. They found $2,000 worth of lottery tickets in his car. All losers. The winner was in the hospital with defensive wounds from trying to protect his mother. When they finally let me talk to Dad, he was still clutching stolen scratch-offs. Check tomorrow's numbers, he said through the phone glass. 7 sevens. It's a sign, son. We're so close. I had to go home and tell Mom that her husband called someone. She collapsed on the kitchen floor. Had to call an ambulance for her too. The seizure lasted 10 minutes. The victim's mother's funeral was the hardest thing I've ever attended. The winner asked me why Dad thought he stole from him. I couldn't answer. After the service, the victim's kids cornered me in the parking lot. 2 sons and a daughter, all in their 30s. Our mother is dead because you didn't stop him. You're gonna pay for what you did. I thought they meant a lawsuit. I didn't realize they meant it literally. The next morning, someone knocked on my door at 6 a.m. I opened the door to find Catherine standing there, one of the victim's daughters. She held a manila envelope and her eyes were cold. Behind her stood her 2 brothers, Jonathan and Nathan. They pushed past me into my apartment without asking. Catherine threw the envelope on my coffee table. Photos spilled out. Pictures of me at work, at the grocery store, walking to my car. Some were taken from inside my workplace. My hands started shaking as I picked them up. Jonathan moved to block my front door while Nathan positioned himself by the kitchen. Catherine sat on my couch like she owned the place. She pulled out more photos from her purse. These showed my mother in her hospital bed taken through the window. I grabbed my phone, but Catherine knocked it from my hand. It skidded across the floor. Nathan picked it up and pocketed it. My heart pounded as I realized how trapped I was. They stayed for 2 hours. Catherine went through my mail, writing down account numbers. Jonathan searched my bedroom while Nathan watched me. They took photos of everything. My work schedule on the fridge, my car registration, even my prescription bottles. When they finally left, Catherine paused at the door. She dropped a business card on the floor. It was for a grief counselor with an appointment time written on the back. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., the same time as my shift at the warehouse. I called in sick the next day. My supervisor wasn't happy, but I couldn't risk missing whatever they had planned. The counselor's office was in a strip mall 40 minutes away. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes before going in. The waiting room was empty except for Nathan reading a magazine. He didn't look up when I entered. The receptionist called my name immediately. The counselor's office had no windows and only one door. Catherine sat behind the desk wearing a blazer. Official-looking certificates hung on the wall, but I couldn't read them from where I sat. She had a notebook open and wrote while I stood there. She made me wait 5 minutes before speaking. Then she listed every detail of my life, where I worked, how much I made, what time I left for work, which route I took, where I bought groceries. She knew about Mom's medical bills, about the second mortgage on the house, about my dad's debts. She slid a paper across the desk. It was a payment plan. $50,000 to be paid over 5 years. Weekly payments of $200. The memo line said, consultation fees. I pushed the paper back, told her I didn't have that kind of money. She pulled out her phone and showed me a video. Security footage from my warehouse. It showed me putting a box in my car. The timestamp was from last week. The box had damaged goods meant for disposal. Expired energy drinks the manager said we could take. But on video, it looked like theft. She had more videos. Me clocking in 2 minutes late, taking an extra 5 minutes on break. Small violations that could add up. She gave me a week to think about it. Said her brothers would be checking in. Told me not to change my routine. Not to tell anyone. Not to go to the police. Then she stood up and left through a back door I hadn't noticed. Nathan was gone when I came out. My car had a flat tire. The spare was flat too. I had to call a tow truck and wait 2 hours. The driver said both tires had been punctured with something thin, like an ice pick. Over the next days, they made their presence known. Jonathan would be at the gas station when I filled up. Nathan appeared in the grocery store aisles. Catherine's car would be parked outside my apartment at random times. My work locker was relocated 3 times that week. Each time my things were slightly disturbed. Nothing missing, but everything touched. My time card went missing twice. Had to explain to HR why I needed replacements. They knew my schedule, but started disrupting it. Construction cones appeared blocking my usual route to work. My apartment building's parking lot would be full when I came home, forcing me to park blocks away. Small inconveniences that added up. The weekend brought escalation. I woke Saturday to find my car battery dead. Jump-started it only to discover sugar in the gas tank at the mechanic. The repair would cost $800 I didn't have. Sunday morning, someone had changed my mailbox lock. The post office was closed. I'd have to wait until Monday to get my mail. Mom's insurance statements were in there. Bills that couldn't wait. I borrowed a neighbor's phone to check my voicemail. 17 missed calls from Mom's hospital. Her insurance had been flagged for review. They needed documentation I couldn't access without my mail. Monday, I missed work dealing with the post office. My supervisor gave me a final warning. The mailbox contained past due notices I'd never seen. My car insurance had lapsed. The registration was expired. Tickets I'd apparently gotten were going to collections. Catherine appeared at the warehouse during my lunch break. She sat in her car watching me eat in the break room. When I went back to work, my station had been reassigned. Had to spend an hour with the floor manager sorting it out. That night, I found Jonathan in my apartment building's laundry room. He was folding clothes that weren't his. My clothes. He'd washed them with something that turned everything pink. Work uniforms I couldn't afford to replace. Nathan started showing up at Mom's hospital. He'd sit in the lobby reading newspapers. Sometimes he'd be in the cafeteria when I went for coffee. Never spoke, never made eye contact, just there. The counselor appointment cards kept coming, tucked under my windshield, slipped under my door, hidden in my work locker. There's something deeply calculated about how these 3 siblings operate that makes me wonder what their real endgame is here. Catherine knowing every detail of his finances, work schedule, even the expired energy drinks. That level of surveillance takes serious planning and resources. All for the same time as my shifts. All at different locations across town. My credit card was declined at the grocery store. The bank said there'd been suspicious activity. Multiple small charges from places I'd never been. Had to cancel the card and wait for a new one. Couldn't buy groceries that week. Work started scheduling me for different shifts without telling me. I'd show up for my regular time to find I wasn't on the roster. The manager said I'd requested the changes. Forms I'd never filled out appeared in my file. The harassment felt endless but stayed just within legal bounds. Nothing I could prove. Nothing police would take seriously. Just 3 grieving adults making my life impossible in small, deniable ways. By the 3rd week, I was exhausted. Missed shifts meant smaller paychecks. Car repairs drained my savings. Mom's medical bills piled up. The payment plan Catherine offered started looking like my only option. But I knew paying wouldn't end it. They didn't want money. They wanted me to suffer like they were suffering. Wanted me to feel responsible for their mother's death. Wanted to destroy my life piece by piece. I started documenting everything. Took photos of Catherine's car outside my building. Recorded Jonathan in the laundry room. Kept the appointment cards. Built a file of their harassment, but knew it wasn't enough. The breaking point came when they targeted Mom directly. Her hospital room was moved without notice. Her medications were questioned by insurance. Her doctors received anonymous complaints about my ability to make her medical decisions. I found Catherine in Mom's new room one evening. She was reading Mom's chart, making notes. Mom was sedated and didn't see her. Catherine left when I entered, but the damage was done. The next morning, Mom's primary doctor wanted to discuss her care. Someone had raised concerns about neglect, suggested I was mismanaging her treatment, implied I might be after insurance money. The investigation would take weeks. That night, I sat in my car outside the warehouse. Couldn't face another shift where everything would go wrong. Couldn't go home where they'd be watching. Couldn't visit Mom without making things worse. My phone buzzed with another appointment reminder. This time, the address was familiar. The house where their mother died, where my father had destroyed everything. They wanted me to come back to where it started. I drove there against my better judgment. The house was dark except for one window. The front door was open. I could see Catherine's car in the driveway. Jonathan's truck parked across the street. Nathan's motorcycle by the garage. They were all waiting inside. The living room where Dad had held them hostage. Where their mother had collapsed. Where everything went wrong. They'd arranged 3 chairs facing one. My chair had a box on it. The box contained every piece of harassment they'd orchestrated. Every photo. Every document. Every receipt. Proof of everything they'd done to me over the past 3 weeks. All organized. All labeled. All pointing back to them. Catherine explained while her brothers stood guard. They wanted me to understand what it felt like. To lose control. To watch your life fall apart. To be helpless while someone destroyed everything you cared about. But they'd made one mistake. In their grief and anger, they'd created evidence. Real evidence. The security footage Catherine showed me also showed her. The appointment cards had fingerprints. The changed documents had digital trails. I realized they wanted me to know it was them. Wanted me to feel targeted and helpless. But in doing so, they'd given me what I needed. Proof of stalking, harassment, fraud. Everything I couldn't prove before was right here. They thought showing me would break me. Make me give up. Accept that I deserved this for not stopping Dad. But they'd miscalculated. They'd given me the tools to fight back. To protect Mom. To reclaim my life. I sat in that chair holding the box of evidence. My mind racing through possibilities. Catherine watched me process what they'd shown me. Her expression unreadable. Jonathan shifted his weight near the door, while Nathan remained perfectly still by the window. The silence stretched until Catherine finally stood and walked to the mantel where family photos still sat. She picked up one showing her mother smiling at a birthday party. She set the photo down and turned back to me. Her brothers moved closer as she explained their next phase. They weren't done with just harassment. They wanted complete destruction of my life, methodical and thorough. She outlined their plans while I gripped the box tighter. They would escalate until I had nothing left. No job, no home, no way to care for Mom, unless I signed their payment agreement and admitted fault for not stopping Dad. I left their house with the box under my arm and their ultimatum ringing in my ears. 1 week to decide. Sign and pay, or watch them systematically destroy everything. The evidence they'd given me felt like both a weapon and a trap. They knew I couldn't go to police without explaining why they targeted me. me. The connection to Dad would make me look complicit. Back at my apartment, I spread everything across my kitchen table. Photos, documents, receipts. Hours passed as I cataloged each piece. My notebook filled with dates, times, connections. Patterns emerged in their harassment. Catherine handled the financial attacks. Jonathan focused on physical intimidation. Nathan specialized in psychological pressure. They'd coordinated perfectly. My phone rang at 3 a.m. The warehouse supervisor needed me to come in immediately. There'd been an incident with my locker. I dressed quickly and drove through empty streets. The parking lot had 2 police cars when I arrived. My supervisor met me at the door looking grim. Someone had planted stolen merchandise in my locker. Expensive electronics from our high-value storage area. Security footage showed a figure in dark clothing accessing my locker after hours. The face wasn't visible, but the build matched mine. My supervisor knew something felt wrong, but company policy required police involvement. The officers took my statement while I watched my job disappear. Without camera footage proving my innocence, suspension was mandatory pending investigation. My supervisor apologized, but his hands were tied. I cleaned out what remained in my locker under police supervision. 3 years of perfect attendance meant nothing now. I spent the rest of that night awake, staring at the evidence box. They'd cost me my income just as Mom's medical bills peaked. The calculated cruelty of it made my chest tight. By morning, I'd made my decision. I wouldn't sign their agreement. I wouldn't admit to something I didn't do, but I also couldn't let them destroy Mom's care. The next phase required careful planning. I started by visiting Mom during off hours when the siblings wouldn't expect it. Her condition had stabilized, but she needed consistent treatment. I spoke with her nurses about the recent disruptions. They'd noticed strange calls and requests, but hadn't connected them. I asked them to document everything unusual going forward. My apartment building's security cameras became my next focus. The manager, an elderly woman who'd known me for years, let me review footage after I explained my stalking situation. We found clear shots of all 3 siblings entering the building at various times. She agreed to save the recordings and change the entry codes. Finding work proved harder than expected. Every application seemed to hit mysterious snags. References couldn't be reached. Background checks flagged issues that didn't exist. One hiring manager called me directly, confused why my previous employer listed me as terminated for theft when I'd told him I was suspended. Someone had been making calls, spreading lies. I started applying under variations of my name, using friends' addresses, anything to bypass their interference. A small moving company finally hired me for cash under the table. The pay was terrible, but it kept gas in my car and food on my table. The physical labor felt good after weeks of helpless frustration. Catherine escalated next. Official-looking letters arrived claiming I owed various debts. Medical bills for Mom that I'd already paid. Utility bills for addresses I'd never lived at. Collection notices for credit cards I'd never opened. Each required hours on the phone to dispute. Time I didn't have between moving jobs and hospital visits. One afternoon while loading a truck, I spotted Nathan across the street. He leaned against a building, watching. When our eyes met, he smiled and waved. My coworkers noticed my tension, but I couldn't explain. He stayed there for an hour, just watching me work. The message was clear. They knew where to find me. Jonathan's approach was more direct. I came home to find my apartment door slightly open. Nothing was missing, but everything had been touched. Furniture moved inches from where it belonged. Kitchen cabinets reorganized. Bathroom items rearranged. The violation of it made my skin crawl. He wanted me to know he could enter whenever he pleased. I installed new locks that night, added a security bar, set up a basic camera system using an old phone. It felt like preparing for siege, but I had no choice. The next morning, scratches covered my door around the locks. Fresh tool marks showed multiple attempts to enter. My preparations had frustrated them. Good. The financial pressure mounted daily. Mom's insurance company demanded documentation I'd already submitted 3 times. Each time I sent it, they claimed it was incomplete or incorrect. I recognized Catherine's hand in the bureaucratic nightmare. She knew exactly how to manipulate systems to cause maximum frustration. My car became their next target. Sugar in the gas tank had been expensive. Now they got creative. Loosened lug nuts that I caught during my daily inspection. These siblings turned grief into a masterclass in coordinated chaos. Catherine handles paperwork nightmares, Jonathan picks locks like it's his hobby, and Nathan just stands there being creepy for fun. Brake fluid puddle that appeared overnight. GPS tracker hidden under the bumper. Each discovery required money I didn't have for repairs. I started parking blocks away and walking. The psychological games intensified. I'd find photos of Dad's victim's mother tucked under my windshield. Newspaper clippings about the crime appeared in my mailbox. Once, I came home to find a lottery ticket taped to my door. The numbers matched Dad's obsession. They wanted me broken by guilt. Work at the moving company became my only refuge. The physical exhaustion helped me sleep. My co-workers, mostly men with their own troubled pasts, didn't ask questions. They noticed when I checked over my shoulder too often but said nothing. The cash payments meant no paper trail for the siblings to follow. 3 weeks into the job, Catherine found me anyway. She stood by our truck at a delivery site, dressed professionally like she belonged there. She watched me carry boxes, making notes in her phone. When I passed close, she mentioned Mom's upcoming treatment schedule. Details she shouldn't know. The threat was implicit. That night I visited Mom again. She was awake this time, confused but lucid. I held her hand while monitors beeped steadily. She asked about Dad, not remembering what I'd told her. I lied and said he was fine. The truth would only hurt her recovery. She squeezed my hand and told me I was a good son. The words nearly broke me. A nurse pulled me aside afterward. She'd documented several strange incidents. Calls asking about Mom's condition from people claiming to be family. Visitors who left when questioned. Someone had even tried to access Mom's medical records using my name. The hospital was increasing security, but the attempts were concerning. I gave the nurse photos of the 3 siblings, asked her to alert security if any of them appeared. She promised to spread the word among the staff. It felt like a small victory in a losing war. At least Mom would be protected even if I couldn't protect myself. The evidence box became my obsession. Late nights spent organizing, cross-referencing, building a timeline. I photographed every piece and stored copies in multiple locations. If something happened to me, someone would find the truth. The paranoia felt justified given their escalating tactics. My phone rang during a particularly difficult move. Mom's doctor needed to speak with me urgently. My chest tightened as I rushed rushed to the hospital. The investigation into my care had concluded. While they found no negligence, the disruption had affected Mom's treatment schedule. She needed additional procedures that insurance might not cover. Catherine was behind this too. Her questions and complaints had created enough doubt to trigger reviews and delays. Each bureaucratic step cost time Mom didn't have. I sat in the hospital financial office staring at numbers I couldn't afford. The administrator sympathized, but policy was policy. I sold everything valuable I owned. My laptop, television, anything that could bring cash. Posted ads for furniture I'd inherited from grandparents. Each sale felt like losing another piece of my history, but Mom needed treatment more than I needed things. The money barely made a dent in the bills. Jonathan appeared at one of my furniture sales. He bought my grandmother's rocking chair, overpaying with a smirk. Watching him load it into his truck felt like swallowing glass. He knew exactly what that chair meant to me. The cruelty was precise, calculated to hurt beyond the monetary loss. Nathan's pressure took a different form. He started showing up at Mom's treatments, never entering her room but always visible in hallways. He'd sit where I'd have to pass, reading the same newspaper for hours. The nurses noticed, but he never did anything they could report. Just a man visiting someone at the hospital. My moving company boss pulled me aside after a month. Someone had called asking questions about me, mentioning theft at my previous job, suggesting I might not be trustworthy around valuable items. He didn't believe them but wanted me to know. The calls were affecting his business. He might have to let me go. I worked harder, hoping to prove my value. Arrived early, stayed late, took the difficult jobs others avoided. But more calls came. Complaints about my work that didn't match reality. Claims I'd damaged items that were pristine. My boss's expression grew more strained each time we talked. The breaking point approached rapidly. Bills accumulated faster than I could pay them. Mom needed medications I couldn't afford. My apartment rent was overdue. The siblings' harassment had achieved its goal. I was drowning, exactly as they'd planned. The payment agreement Catherine offered started looking like my only option, but something shifted in me during those dark weeks. The constant pressure had worn me down, but also hardened something inside. I stopped feeling guilty about Dad's actions, stopped accepting blame for things beyond my control, started getting angry instead. They wanted to destroy an innocent person out of misplaced grief. I began fighting back in small ways. When Jonathan followed me, I led him on pointless drives that wasted his gas. When Nathan appeared at the hospital, I alerted security about a suspicious man. When Catherine called my workplace, I had co-workers answer saying I wasn't there. Petty victories, but they felt good. The evidence box grew with my own documentation, photos of them stalking me, recordings of their harassment, witnesses who'd seen their behavior. I built my own case while they built theirs. The difference was, mine was defensive. I just wanted them to stop. They wanted complete destruction. My boss finally had to let me go. The calls and complaints had cost him 2 clients. He paid me cash for my last week and wished me luck. I understood. He had his own business to protect. Another job gone, another income source eliminated. The siblings were winning their war of attrition. I sat in Mom's hospital room that night watching her sleep. The machines keeping her stable cost more per day than I'd made per week. Insurance covered some, but not enough. The bills would force me to lose the apartment soon. Then what? Live in my car while they continued their assault? How long before they took that too? Catherine must have sensed my desperation. She appeared at the hospital the next morning with a new offer. The payment plan could be reduced if I publicly admitted responsibility for not stopping Dad. A letter to the local paper. A statement taking blame. She'd even written it for me. All I had to do was sign. I read her prepared statement in the hospital cafeteria. It painted me as negligent, complicit in Dad's breakdown. Someone who chose to enable instead of intervene. Every word was crafted to destroy my reputation while absolving them of harassment. Legal language protected them from any retaliation. The paper felt heavy in my hands. Signing meant admitting to lies but keeping Mom's care funded. Refusing meant watching her suffer while I fought a battle I couldn't win. They'd orchestrated this moment perfectly. Every action had led to this impossible choice. Sign and live with the shame, or refuse and live with the consequences. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. Told Catherine I needed time to think. She smiled, knowing she'd won. Gave me 48 hours before the offer expired. After that, the harassment would escalate beyond anything I'd experienced. The threat in her eyes was clear. This was their mercy. Take it or face worse. Walking through the hospital corridors, I felt the weight of everything crushing down. Dad's obsession had started this, but the siblings had turned it into something monstrous. Their grief had twisted into cruelty. They needed someone to blame, and I was the only target left. Fighting them was destroying me, but giving in meant accepting their lie. I spent that night reviewing everything in the evidence box one more time. Their meticulous documentation of their own crimes, my counter-documentation of their harassment, 2 parallel cases built on pain and anger, neither of us backing down, neither willing to stop. The cycle had to break somehow. The answer came while staring at their photos of me. In every image, I looked exhausted, defeated, broken. They documented my destruction thinking it showed their victory, but it also showed something else. The systematic nature of their campaign, the coordination required, the resources they'd invested in destroying one person. I stared at the evidence box for hours that night, formulating a plan. The siblings had documented everything meticulously, thinking it proved their power over me, but they'd also created a paper trail of criminal harassment. Every photo, every forged document, every recorded incident could work against them if presented correctly. The next morning, I made copies of everything at a 24-hour print shop. 3 complete sets of their harassment documentation. 1 for safekeeping, 1 for my plan, and 1 backup hidden at a friend's place. The clerk didn't ask questions about the strange collection of photos and documents, just took my cash and handed me the copies. My first stop was Catherine's workplace. I'd researched where she worked during my documentation phase, a mid-sized accounting firm downtown. Professional reputation meant everything in her field. I arrived during lunch hour when the office would be busiest. The receptionist looked up as I entered, carrying a large envelope. I asked for Catherine's supervisor by name, information I'd gathered from the company website. When asked about the nature of my visit, I simply said it concerned Catherine's conduct outside of work that could affect the firm's reputation. The supervisor agreed to see me after a 20-minute wait. His office had glass walls, visible to the entire floor. Perfect. I spread out select pieces of evidence across his desk. Catherine Catherine's workplace strategy feels oddly specific. Why did he pick the lunch hour unless he knew exactly how that office operated from watching her? This careful timing and the glass walls detail suggests he's been planning this particular move for quite some time. Photos of Catherine stalking me, the forged counselor appointment cards, documentation of her harassment at my workplace, the fraudulent debt letters she'd sent. His expression changed as he reviewed each item. I explained the situation calmly, focusing on facts rather than emotion. Catherine had been systematically harassing me for weeks. I had proof. I wasn't asking for her termination, just for him to be aware of her activities. The firm's reputation could suffer if her behavior escalated or became public. Catherine walked past the office as I was leaving. She saw the papers on her supervisor's desk, saw me shaking his hand. Her face went pale. She rushed toward the office, but I was already at the elevator. The last thing I saw was her supervisor's serious expression as she entered his office. Jonathan's construction company was next. Blue-collar environments handled things differently than corporate offices. I found the job site where he was working from social media posts he'd made. Waited until the crew took their afternoon break. I approached the site foreman with a different strategy. Showed him photos of Jonathan breaking into my apartment, the damaged locks, his presence in my building's laundry room destroying my property. Construction workers valued trust and reliability. A crew member who committed breaking and entering reflected poorly on the entire company. The foreman studied the evidence with growing concern. He called Jonathan over. I watched Jonathan's confident stride falter when he saw me standing with his boss. The foreman held up the photos, asking for an explanation. Jonathan's co-workers gathered around, curious about the commotion. I left while Jonathan stammered excuses. Several workers were shaking their heads. One mentioned something about background checks. Another wondered aloud what else Jonathan might be hiding. The damage to his reputation was immediate and public. Nathan proved trickier. He worked freelance, no employer to approach. But I'd noticed something during my research. He was active in online photography communities, proud of his work. His portfolio website listed upcoming gallery shows where his work would be displayed. I created a simple website documenting Nathan's harassment, with a focus on his stalking photography. Every photo he'd taken of me without consent, the times and dates, the invasion of privacy. I made sure the site was factual, not defamatory, just a clear presentation of his behavior. Then I printed business cards with the website address and a brief description. Nathan, last name, stalking photography project. I arrived early at his gallery opening that weekend, placed cards discreetly near the guest book, the wine table, anywhere visitors might notice them. Within an hour, people were pulling up the website on their phones. Whispered conversations spread through the gallery. Nathan noticed the shift in atmosphere. When he realized what was happening, he tried to collect the cards, but more kept appearing. Gallery visitors were comparing his artistic work to his stalking photos. The exhibition ended early. The siblings' coordinated harassment began falling apart. Catherine faced disciplinary action at work. Jonathan lost his position on the construction crew. Nathan's reputation in the photography community was damaged. They'd wanted me to feel powerless. Instead, I'd used their own evidence to expose their behavior to people who mattered to them, but they weren't finished. The 48-hour deadline for Catherine's offer passed. I expected escalation, but not what came next. They targeted the moving company where I'd briefly worked, not with calls this time, but by showing up as customers. They hired the company for a large moving job, specifically requesting me as part of the crew. My former boss called, desperate. It was a big contract he couldn't afford to lose. Could I help out just this once? I agreed, sensing a trap, but needing to see their next move. The job site was a house in foreclosure, empty, isolated, perfect for whatever they planned. The siblings were all there when we arrived. They directed us to load boxes from the garage, heavy ones they'd pre-packed. My coworkers started loading while I stayed alert. Halfway through the job, Catherine announced items were missing from the boxes, valuable items. She demanded to search our truck. My coworkers protested, but she threatened to call the police. Said she had security footage of us stealing. The same false accusation pattern, but this time targeting innocent coworkers. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Announced clearly that I was documenting the false accusations. Catherine tried to grab my phone, but I stepped back. I stated for the recording that this was part of their ongoing harassment campaign, that I had evidence of their previous false accusations. My former boss arrived, alerted by my text. He'd brought the actual police with him, explaining the situation on the way. The officers separated everyone for questioning. I provided them with copies of my harassment documentation. The siblings' story fell apart when they couldn't produce any actual evidence of theft. The police issued warnings about false reports. My coworkers were furious about being used as pawns. The moving company banned the siblings as customers, and word spread to other local companies. Their attempt to frame me had backfired spectacularly. Mom's condition improved enough for discharge planning to begin. The hospital social worker helped me navigate insurance appeals. We documented how the siblings' interference had disrupted her care. The insurance company reversed several denials when presented with evidence of deliberate sabotage of their processes. I found a new job through the hospital's employment assistance program. Night custodial work that let me visit Mom during the day. The pay was better than the warehouse with actual benefits. The siblings couldn't infiltrate a hospital's hiring process as easily as smaller businesses. They made one final attempt at control. I came home to find an envelope under my door. Legal letterhead this time. They were threatening to sue me for defamation over the website about Nathan. The letter demanded I remove it immediately or face legal action. I took the letter to the hospital's legal aid clinic. The volunteer attorney reviewed my documentation and laughed. Truth was an absolute defense against defamation. Every claim on the website was backed by evidence. Their letter was just another intimidation tactic. She helped me draft a response that made clear I would countersue for harassment if they pursued legal action. The siblings went quiet after that. No more stalking, no more interference at work, no more false accusations. They'd learned that their grief didn't give them the right to destroy my life, that I wouldn't accept blame for Dad's actions, that I could and would defend myself. Mom came home 3 weeks later, weak but stable. I'd converted the living room into a recovery space, medical equipment covered by insurance after appeals, visiting nurses to help with care, a chance at recovery that had seemed impossible during the worst of the harassment. I kept the evidence box, added the legal threats and final documentation, a complete record of what grief could twist people into, how 3 adults had convinced themselves that destroying me would somehow ease their pain, how they'd failed. The siblings vanished from my life as suddenly as they'd appeared. No apologies, no acknowledgement of what they'd put me through, just absence. I heard through others that Catherine left her job. Jonathan moved to another state. Nathan closed his photography business. Sometimes I'd catch myself checking over my shoulder, looking for familiar faces in crowds, old habits from weeks of being stalked. But gradually, the hypervigilance faded. Life settled into new routines. Work, mom's care, slow financial recovery. The lottery tickets Dad had been clutching when arrested still sat in an evidence bag somewhere. Worthless paper that had destroyed so many lives. I never bought a single ticket, never would. Some lessons came at too high a price to forget. Mom never fully understood what happened while she was hospitalized. I kept the details vague, focusing on her recovery instead. She knew Dad was gone, that something terrible had occurred, but the full truth about the siblings' campaign would only hurt her. Some burdens were meant to be carried alone. 6 months later, I was mopping the hospital corridor when I saw a familiar face. The lottery winner Dad had attacked. He was visiting someone, walking slowly but steadily. Our eyes met. He nodded, a small acknowledgement of shared tragedy. Then he continued down the hall. I finished my shift that night thinking about cycles of pain, how Dad's obsession had rippled outward, touching so many lives, how the siblings had chosen to continue that cycle, how I'd chosen to break it, not through forgiveness or understanding, but through simple refusal to be destroyed. The evidence box sat in my closet, a reminder of how quickly life could spiral into darkness, but also proof of survival, of fighting back, of refusing to accept blame for others' choices. The siblings had wanted me broken. Instead, they'd taught me my own strength. Mom needed help with her evening medications when I got home. I prepared her pills, helped her eat dinner, listened to her talk about the birds she'd watched through the window. Simple moments that had almost been stolen by 3 people's misdirected rage. They were out there somewhere, living with the consequences of their choices, just as I lived with mine. The difference was, I could sleep peacefully, knowing I'd never targeted innocence in my pain, never tried to destroy someone who'd already lost everything, never let grief turn me into someone monstrous. The harassment had ended not with grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but through steady resistance, through refusing to accept their narrative, through exposing their actions to natural consequences. They'd wanted a victim, they'd found a survivor instead. What a ride, honestly. Appreciate you letting me toss in my 2 cents along the way. Subscribe for more content like this. Catch you on the flip side.